To better understand the idea of Qatari nationalism among the country's expats, I met Sultan Barakat from the Doha Institute and asked him how the blockade had affected the foreigners.
It has actually brought them together even closer. I think it has consolidated a lot of that nationalist feeling. The intention of the blockade, or part of it, was to try and destabilize the country by stirring up some kind of opposition. And I think it totally backfired. They received exactly the opposite result. Now very much the Emir is supported, loved by everyone. And if the only thing that happened is that those who were on the fringes, maybe thinking alternatively, trying to develop some ideas far from the mainstream, have, if anything, now been exposed, and they disappeared from society. There's just they have no voice anymore. So I think it has consolidated that national feeling, and Qatar has been very smart dealing with the residents, because somehow you ask residents in the country who are not nationals, and they feel equally supportive. They were made to feel that they're part of the same challenge, facing the same challenge. Everyone has to carry their own bit, and everything from the statement of the Emir in September in the General Assembly, where he acknowledged the residents and the role they play in building the economy of Qatar, the culture of Qatar, all the way to them now reviewing residency law, trying to advance the visa procedure, etc. All of this has helped to bring not just the 300,000 together, but the 2.5 million people.
Some would say under pressure as a result of these demands that were made.
I think a lot of those policies were in the making beforehand, to be honest, but it was accelerated under pressure. I think if you look at the progressive politics that Qatar has been pursuing, and this part of the problem with the Saudis for the last 15 years.
Progressive politics, according to you and according to Qatar, but the Saudis say,
the
Emiratis say,
they see it threatening.
Politics of interference, politics of disruption.
They see it threatening, I think, because it doesn't really dove well with their autocratic ways of doing things, and them sticking to the past patterns. I think the Qataris have been very much forward-looking in a number of areas, including media, Al Jazeera, freedom of speech, expression.
Not necessarily democracy, but...
not necessarily democracy. I don't think they've ever claimed that they are a democratic society or ruled in a democratic pattern. But they have
pushed in that direction as a result of this blockade. Would they?
They've accelerated plans that have been in the making for some time. The Shura Council, the elections in the municipalities. The elections in the municipalities took place before the blockade. The Shura Council, the idea that members of the Shura Council will be elected, has been talked about for a long time, and it's been postponed.
There is convergence as far as Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Iran are concerned, that they all have these vast resources, energy resources. But in the case of Saudi Arabia and Qatar, these resources, or the global demand for them, is waning. Do you think oil and energy plays into the tensions in the GCC as well somehow?
It surely does, but I think again, if you look at if you contrast Saudi Arabia to Qatar for a minute, Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 was only created or thought about last year or the year before. Qatar's Vision 2030 was in the making since 2008. And the whole billions of dollars they invested in things like Qatar Foundation. The objective of it was to move the economy into knowledge-based economy. They invested in higher education and research, and now you can count Qatar amongst the nations that publish original research around the world and create knowledge and so on. So that has been, I think, the vision for a long time. Now, clearly, there's been conflict in visions and speeds. I think if you look at around us here, in the last 20 years, what they've achieved is absolutely amazing. If you take it in Europe, could be 20 years could be spent debating a new infrastructure project, whether it should go through this city or not, conservation, etc. Here, the speed of change is incredible. And they've done very well to manage it, I think, compared to other countries. Now, that has largely been achieved by having the freedom of exporting gas. Had they relied on gas export through Saudi Arabia or stuck to that idea of a pipeline, I think they would have been total disaster. What they've done, which was extremely smart, is to develop the liquid gas technology and then be able to access the whole world through the seas. And this thing was not affected by the blockade, and you can see it in their economy today. It is a rentier state, it relies on gas, it continues to rely largely on gas, but the blockade has helped them also focus more on diversifying their economy. They started to manufacture better.
Transport.
Yeah, they are indigenizing a lot of industries, including transport and lots of other areas. Yeah.
We see Turkey in an interesting position as well in all of this. It has at least 500 soldiers, officers in Qatar, working closely with Qatari officers and soldiers. What is Turkey's long-term goal in Qatar and the region vis-a-vis Iran and Saudi Arabia as well?
Well, I think the agendas of both Turkey and Qatar meet on a number of areas. Vis-a-vis, say, Palestine, they're very close with Erdogan. Their vision on what should have happened in Syria was very much aligned for a long time. Their relationship with Iran is an area where they both agree that we don't need to make an enemy of Iran, but we don't have to be total friends with it. So there are a number of areas in East Africa where they agree together. And again, the idea of having soldiers coming to Qatar was in fact in the making before the blockade.
What is the way forward for Qatar, and where does this crisis end for the country, the blockade end? Because these demands are still ongoing.
The demands are still ongoing, and I think the position in Qatar is still refusing all of those demands on the basis that they touch on issues of sovereignty. Having said that, I think there has been some moves. A few weeks ago, the head of the Qatari army was in Riyadh taking part in a regional meeting. Before that, Qatar participated in a countering terrorism meeting held in Kuwait and sponsored by the Saudis and the Americans. And also, I think last week there was a similar meeting in Tajikistan. There was another one in Kuwait. So there are some contacts taking place. I mean, if you look at a lot of the international initiatives, say on counterterrorism as an example, Qatar is a member of all of those and supports them very well.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.